Elias Carter adjusted his charcoal suit as he surveyed the atrium of Lunara Resort, the first luxury establishment on the moon's sea of tranquility. Holographic butterflies danced between exotic plants from Earth and Mars, while the curved dome ceiling revealed the star-speckled blackness of space above. Double quotes, Mr. Carter. The Martian delegation has confirmed their arrival for tomorrow's summit, said Zira, his Venusian assistant. Her amber skin gleamed as she handed him a data tablet. Excellent. Ensure their suites are prepped with the humidifiers they requested, Elias replied, frowning at the financial report on the screen. Something in the numbers didn't add up, but he couldn't pinpoint what. Guests from across the solar system mingled in the atrium, Earth diplomats, Martian entrepreneurs, and even a few representatives from the outer moons. Elias had built Lunara as a neutral ground for interplanetary negotiations, a symbol of humanity's successful expansion beyond Earth. And the quarterly inventory seems to be missing several items, Zira added, her voice unusually hesitant. I'll review it tonight, Elias said, returning the tablet. As Zira walked away, he noticed her eyes darting nervously to the service exit. He was heading toward his office when he felt a gentle tug on his sleeve. Looking down, he found himself staring into striking violet eyes. A small, alien child stood before him, her skin a soft lavender hue that seemed to shimmer under the atrium's lights. Her short purple hair curled around delicate pointed ears. Can I help you, little one? Elias asked, kneeling to her level. Are you lost? The child glanced around before leaning closer. They're stealing from you, she whispered, her voice melodic, yet urgent. Who is? Elias asked, surprised by her directness. Your staff? The ones from Venus. They're taking things. Her violet eyes held his with unsettling intensity. Credits, supplies, information? That's quite an imagination you have, Elias chuckled, though something in her earnestness gave him pause. Where are your parents? I'm not imagining it, she insisted, the silver bracelets on her wrists catching the light as she crossed her arms. Check your numbers tonight. They don't match. Before Elias could respond, a tall figure approached. Lyra. There you are. A Neptunian man with blue-green skin nodded apologetically to Elias. Sorry, sir. My niece is too curious for her own good. No problem, Elias said, standing. She's quite ... perceptive. As the Neptunian led her away, the girl looked back. Tonight, she mouthed silently. Check tonight. That evening, Elias sat in his penthouse suite, nursing a glass of rare earth whiskey. The child's words echoed in his mind. On a whim, he opened the resort's financial records for the past year. At first glance, everything seemed normal. But as he dug deeper, patterns emerged, inventory discrepancies. Missing credits, service charges that exceeded actual costs. Each anomaly was small, easily overlooked. Together they formed an unmistakable pattern of systematic theft. Damn it, he muttered, setting his glass down hard. By morning, his decision was made. He called an all-staff meeting in the grand ballroom. Every employee from Venusian security to Martian maintenance stood nervously before him. I've discovered evidence of extensive theft throughout Lunara, Elias announced, his voice echoing in the vast space. Rather than spending months investigating, I've made an executive decision. He paused, scanning the room. Some looked confused, others anxious, and a few he noted with grim satisfaction looked terrified. You're all fired. Effective immediately. The room erupted in protests. Elias raised his hand for silence. Security will escort you to collect personal items. You'll receive 1 week severance. I expect everyone off premises within 3 hours. As the stunned staff filed out, Elias caught sight of a small purple figure watching from a service entrance. The alien girl, Lyra, gave him a solemn nod before vanishing into the shadows. Only later, as the last employee badge was surrendered, did Elias grasp the magnitude of his decision. He stood alone in the vast, silent atrium of Lunara and whispered to himself, "What have I done?" By mid-afternoon, Lunara Resort had descended into chaos. The once serene atrium now echoed with the complaints of frustrated guests, Luggage sat abandoned near the entrance. The automated systems flashed error messages, and the atmospheric regulators had begun to malfunction, leaving some sections uncomfortably warm and others chilly. Elias stood behind the reception desk, his tie loosened and his normally immaculate hair disheveled. He'd managed to placate a few guests with complimentary upgrades and credit vouchers, but his charm was wearing thin against the tide of dissatisfaction. "I apologize, Ambassador Trell, but our chef is temporarily unavailable," he explained to an imposing Martian diplomat. Perhaps I could arrange delivery from one of the colony's restaurants." "Unacceptable," the red-skinned ambassador growled. "My delegation requires specific nutrient compounds that only your chef was certified to prepare. We will be departing immediately." As the ambassador stormed off, Elias slumped against the counter. The Martian delegation represented 12 premium suites booked for 2 lunar cycles, a substantial financial blow. "You look like you could use some help." The voice was melodic with an amused undertone. Elias looked up to find himself staring into eyes the same violet shade as the child's from yesterday. God. But set in an adult face that made his breath catch. She stood tall and graceful, her skin a deeper lavender than Lyra's, with intricate silver patterns that caught the light as she moved. Hair, several shades darker purple, was styled in an elegant updo that framed high cheekbones and full lips curved into a knowing smile. She wore a form-fitting silver jumpsuit with violet accents that complemented her natural coloring. "I'm Naira," she said, extending a slender hand. "And you've already met my daughter." Elias straightened, suddenly conscious of his disheveled appearance. "Elias Carter." "Your daughter made quite an impression." He shook her hand, noticing the pleasant warmth of her touch and the subtle floral scent that surrounded her. "Enough of an impression that you fired your entire staff," she said, her tone light, but her gaze penetrating. "I found evidence supporting her claim," he replied defensively, "though I may have been impulsive." Naira laughed, a sound like crystal chimes. "Impulsive? You've single-handedly created the biggest employment crisis this colony has seen. The Interplanetary Workers' Union is already filing complaints." Elias groaned. "Perfect. What you need," Naira said, leaning closer, "is someone who understands financial forensics and interplanetary labor law." She produced a holographic business card. "Fortunately for you, that's exactly what I do." The card displayed her credentials. "Naira Zell, special investigator specializing in interplanetary fraud cases." "Why would you help me?" Elias asked suspiciously. "For all I know, you could be working with whoever was stealing from me." Naira's eyes flashed dangerously. "First, I don't steal, I catch thieves." Second, my daughter has taken an unusual interest in your situation, and I've learned to trust her instincts." She paused, her gaze traveling over him appraisingly. "And third, let's just say, I find humans fascinating." The way she said fascinating sent a rush of warmth through Elias. "Besides," she continued, "I've been investigating similar theft patterns across 3 colonies. Your resort might be the key to breaking my case." Before Elias could respond, crash sounded from the direction of the bar, followed by angry shouts. "I should handle that," he said with a wince. "Yes, you should," Naira agreed, stepping back with an amused expression. "Meanwhile, I'll start reviewing your financial records, assuming you want my help." Their eyes locked, and Elias felt something spark between them, a connection that transcended species. He found himself wondering what it would be like to trace the silver patterns on her lavender skin. "Mr. Carter?" she prompted, one eyebrow raised elegantly. Elias cleared his throat. Yes, I want your help. My office is on the top level." "You'll need clearance too, already handled," she interrupted, holding up a security pass. "Lyra borrowed your credentials yesterday while you were distracted." "She what?" Leah sputtered. Naira's lips curved into a smile that was both apologetic and proud. "My daughter has unique abilities. Don't worry, she only uses them for good. Usually." "This is definitely not an amateur operation," Naira said, gesturing at the holographic financial records floating above Elias's desk. It was well past midnight, and they'd been analyzing data for hours in his penthouse office. "The pattern is too sophisticated." To methodical, she continued. See how these transfers are fragmented and routed through multiple accounts before vanishing? Elias leaned closer, his shoulder brushing against hers. He tried to focus on the numbers rather than the subtle floral scent of her skin or how the office lighting caught the silver patterns along her neck. How did I miss this? He muttered, rubbing his tired eyes. Because humans tend to trust what's right in front of them, Naira replied with a slight smile. My species evolved as natural skeptics. We look for patterns in chaos. And what pattern are you seeing here? He asked, curious about both the case and her. The same one I've tracked across 3 other colonies. A criminal syndicate targeting businesses with high credit flow and minimal oversight. She turned to face him, their faces now inches apart. But what I can't figure out is why Lyra took such an interest in your case, specifically. The mention of her daughter broke the moment. Where is she now? Asleep in one of your empty suites, Naira said. She insisted on staying to help fix your systems. She's quite good with technology. Why would she care about my problems? Naira hesitated. Lyra has always been drawn to puzzles and to humans. Why humans? Elias asked. Her father was human, Naira replied quietly. A researcher who visited our homeworld. He left before she was born. I'm sorry, Elias said genuinely. Don't be. On my world, parental connections aren't necessarily permanent. She studied his reaction. That concept bothers you, doesn't it? Different worlds, different customs, he replied diplomatically, though something in him did rebel at the idea. Naira laughed softly. That's what fascinates me about humans. You're so adaptable in some ways, yet so attached to your core beliefs in others. Their eyes locked, and Elias felt that electric connection again. He leaned forward slightly, testing boundaries. Naira didn't pull away. You should know, she murmured. My species forms emotional bonds differently than humans. More intensely, but not always as enduring. Is that a warning or an invitation? Elias asked, his voice low. Before she could answer, the office door slid open. Lyra stood in the doorway, rubbing her eyes sleepily. I fixed the atmospheric regulators, she announced, seemingly oblivious to the moment she'd interrupted. And I found something strange in the security network. Elias cleared his throat and straightened. What kind of strange? Hidden cameras, Lyra said, padding across the room and climbing onto a chair. They're not on the official security grid. I only found them because I was redirecting power from non-essential systems. Naira's expression sharpened. Show us. Lyra's small fingers danced across the control panel with surprising dexterity. The holographic display shifted from financial data to a security interface. See these power signatures? She pointed to tiny anomalies. Each one is a camera recording and transmitting data somewhere off Colony. Can you access the footage? Elias asked. Lyra nodded. Already did. The display changed to show a recording of Elias's office, this very room from a high angle. The timestamp indicated it was from 3 days ago. Elias watched himself meeting with Zira and the financial director. I never authorized cameras in my private office, he said angrily. Naira hushed him. Focusing on the footage on screen, Elias left the office. Moments later, the financial director returned alone, went straight to Elias's terminal, and began accessing files. That snake, Elias growled. He was using my access codes. Wait, Lyra said. There's more. The scene shifted to another day. This time, the financial director was meeting with someone Elias didn't recognize at all. Thin man with pale gray skin and sharp features. Pause, Naira commanded suddenly. Enhance his face. The image zoomed in on the gray-skinned man. Nira's expression hardened. You know him? Elias asked. Administrator Vex, she said grimly. Head of Lunar Security and Commerce. I've suspected his involvement in these thefts, but could never prove it. A colony administrator? Why would someone in his position risk stealing from businesses? Because it's not about the money, Naira replied. It's about control, information, blackmail potential. Lyra yawned widely, seemingly bored by adult conversations about motives. Back to bed, little one, Naira said gently. You've done amazing work tonight." After Lyra reluctantly departed, Naira turned to Elias with new intensity in her eyes. "We need to be careful. If Vex realizes we have this footage, we'll both be in danger." "I'm not afraid of some corrupt bureaucrat," Elias said firmly. "You should be." He didn't reach his position by being gentle with opponents. She placed a hand on his arm. This just became much more dangerous than financial fraud. The touch of her hand sent warmth through him despite the seriousness of her words. As they stood close in the quiet office, the colony's artificial night cycle casting soft shadows around them, Elias was acutely aware of how alone they were. "We should get some rest," he suggested, though rest was the last thing on his mind. "Tomorrow we can decide our next move." Nira's violet eyes held his, that same electric connection humming between them. "Yes," she agreed softly. "Tomorrow is soon enough to face danger." As they walked toward the door, the light suddenly flickered and died, plunging the office into darkness except for the faint emergency lighting. "That's not Lyra's doing, is it?" Elias asked, instantly alert. "No," Naira whispered. "I think someone just realized we've been looking at their footage." In the dim light, her lavender skin seemed to glow softly. Elias reached for her hand instinctively, and she took it without hesitation. "My quarters have independent power and security," he said. "We should go there now." Ilias's private quarters occupied the entire eastern wing of Lunara's top level. Unlike the sleek, minimalist design that dominated the resort's public spaces, his personal domain was distinctly earth-inspired warm wood tones, genuine leather furnishings, and actual printed books on shelves. The large windows, currently darkened to opacity, normally offered a breathtaking view of Earth hanging like a blue jewel in the black sky. Independent power, independent air supply, and security systems isolated from the main grid, Elias explained as he activated a control panel by the door. A soft amber glow emanated from recessed lighting as the backup power engaged. Paranoid, perhaps, but it seems justified now. Naira ran her fingers along the spines of his books. "Not paranoid prudent." She paused. "Though I'm surprised by all this Earth nostalgia, it keeps me grounded," Elias admitted. "Out here surrounded by a dozen different cultures, it's easy to lose your sense of self." "And what self is that?" Naira asked, turning to face him. In the amber light, her lavender skin seemed to shimmer with subtle bioluminescence, an effect he hadn't noticed before, just a human trying to build something lasting in an indifferent universe. He replied with a half-smile. A distant boom shook the room slightly, followed by the muffled sound of alarms. "That wasn't a simple power failure," Naira said, moving swiftly to the window. She adjusted the opacity to see outside. "Smoke. Third level, east section." Elias joined her at the window. "That's the main server room. If they're destroying evidence, we need to secure what we have." "Already done," Naira finished his thought. She pulled a small device from her pocket. "I downloaded copies of the surveillance footage while Lyra was showing us." Basic investigator's instinct, their eyes met, and Elias felt a surge of admiration for her foresight. "You're remarkable." "I'm thorough," she corrected. But her lips curved into a pleased smile. Another explosion rocked the building, closer this time. The lights flickered momentarily. "They're not being subtle," Elias observed grimly. "Where's Lyra?" "Guest suite on the 4th level." "Don't worry, she has protective protocols I've programmed since she was a toddler. If there's danger, she'll go into lockdown mode." Elias raised an eyebrow. "What kind of life have you two led that your child needs lockdown mode?" "The kind where I make powerful enemies by exposing their crimes," Naira replied simply. She moved to the center of the room, suddenly all business. "We need to contact colony security. Someone not loyal to Vex." "I have a direct line to Earth's embassy security," Elias said, moving to a concealed panel in the wall. "But communications might be compromised." As he worked to establish a connection, Naira paced the room. Her movements graceful despite the tension evident in her posture. Vex won't stop at destroying evidence. Once he realizes we're onto him, he'll eliminate witnesses. He can try, Elias said with quiet confidence. He abandoned the communication panel after several failed attempts. Lines are jammed. We're on our own until morning, at least. Their eyes met across the room. Something shifted in the atmosphere between them. The danger, the isolation, the forced intimacy, it all crystallized into an electric awareness that had been building since they first met. Naira moved toward him with deliberate steps. Your species has a curious response to danger, she observed, her voice dropping to a lower register. Increased heart rate, heightened senses, adrenaline, fight or flight, Elias replied, not backing away as she approached. But there's a third response, isn't there? Her fingers traced the line of his jaw. One that affirms life in the face of potential death. Elias caught her hand, holding it against his cheek. Is that a clinical observation or personal interest? Both, she admitted. My species doesn't compartmentalize the way humans do. Danger, desire, curiosity, they're all connected for us. Another distant explosion punctuated her words. But neither of them flinched. And what are you curious about? Elias asked, his free hand finding the small of her back, drawing her closer. Everything human, she whispered. Your contradictions, your passions, your strange, beautiful insistence on hope, even when logic suggests otherwise. Their lips met with an intensity that surprised them both. Her skin was warmer than a human's, almost feverish to the touch. And that subtle electricity he'd felt when they first shook hands now seemed to envelop them both. Time blurred as they explored each other, alien and human. Different, yet fundamentally compatible in ways that transcended biology. Later, as they lay entwined in his bed, Naira traced patterns on his chest with a fingertip that left faint, luminescent trails on his skin. Your heart beats differently than mine, she observed. Single, steady, strong. Is that good or bad? Elias asked, watching the glowing patterns fade. Just different. My people have dual hearts, smaller, faster. She placed his hand on her chest, guiding his fingers to feel the unusual double rhythm beneath her skin. We evolved that way to survive variable pressure environments. Efficient, he murmured, fascinated by this intimate alien detail, but less poetic, perhaps. Your literature speaks of hearts breaking. Mine would just switch to the backup. Her tone was light, but something in her eyes suggested vulnerability. Elias smiled, stroking her cheek. I think having a backup heart sounds incredibly poetic. Doubled the capacity for feeling. A soft chime from the bedside console interrupted them. Elias reached over to check it, instantly alert. Motion sensors on the residential floor, he said. Someone's trying to access the guest suites. Naira sat up immediately. Lyra. They dressed quickly, the intimate mood shattered by renewed danger. Elias retrieved a compact pulse weapon from a hidden compartment in his closet. Standard Earth model, he explained. Checking the charge. Legal for personal protection, even on lunar colonies? Naira nodded approvingly. Humans and their weapons another contradiction. I find oddly reassuring at the moment, as they prepared to leave the safety of his quarters. Elias caught her arm. Whatever happens, we face it together. I protect what's mine. Something flashed in Naira's eye, surprise. Perhaps, or a deeper emotion. We're not yours. Elias? Not by my cultural standards. I wasn't referring to ownership, he clarified, but to caring, to commitment. That's what humans do. We protect what matters to us. Her expression softened. Another human trait to admire. She leaned in for one more quick, fierce kiss. Now, let's go save my daughter and your resort from a corrupt administrator. Elias and Naira moved silently through the emergency stairwell, avoiding the main corridors where Vex's agents might be waiting. The resort's emergency lighting cast eerie red shadows as they descended toward the residential levels. Lyra has emergency protocols, Naira whispered as they paused at a landing. If she sensed danger, she would have activated her personal shield and hidden. Does she have a designated safe location? Elias asked, checking his weapon. Several. She's programmed to find the most secure spot with access to data networks. The The backup server room on level 6, Elias suggested. It's shielded and has independent power. They had just reached the 4th level when a group of panicked guests burst through the door, nearly colliding with them. "Mr. Carter?" exclaimed a startled European businessman. "The resort is under attack. Armed intruders are searching the rooms." "Stay calm," Elias commanded with natural authority. "Follow the emergency exit markers to the shuttle bay on level 2. Evacuation protocols are in place." As the guests hurried past, Naira touched Ilias's arm. "You're lying. There are no evacuation shuttles prepped." "No, but there's a secure lounge near the bay with reinforced doors. They'll be safer there than wandering the corridors." He gave her a grim smile. "Hospitality Management 101. Sometimes you need to direct the herd." When they reached Lyra's assigned suite, the door was ajar, ever a good sign. Elias entered first, weapon raised. While Naira covered his flank with a slender energy blade she'd produced from somewhere in her clothing, the room was empty but showed signs of a hasty departure drawers left open, a child-sized jacket abandoned on the floor. No signs of struggle, however, which Elias took as positive. "She left voluntarily," Naira confirmed, examining the room with a mother's knowing eye. "And she took her data tablet. The charging dock is empty." A soft beeping sound drew their attention to a small device blinking beneath the bed. Naira knelt to retrieve it. "It's Lyra's tracker," she said, her eyes widening. "She's activated her emergency beacon." She checked the signal. Level 6. The backup server room. "You were right." They moved quickly, but cautiously through the resort's service corridors, avoiding the main hallways where security cameras might be watching. Twice they ducked into utility closets to avoid patrols of gray uniformed security officers, not Elias's staff, but Vex's personal force. When they finally reached the backup server room, they found the door securely locked from the inside. A good sign. Naira pressed her palm against the scanner, and after a moment's hesitation, the door slid open. Lyra sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by floating holographic screens, her small fingers moving rapidly across virtual interfaces. She barely looked up as they entered. "You're late," she said matter-of-factly. "I've been tracking Administrator Vex's communications. He's called in his security team from the main colony. They're setting charges throughout the resort." "Charges?" Elias repeated, alarmed. "He's going to destroy the entire resort?" "No," Lyra replied, still focused on her screens. "Just enough to cover his tracks and eliminate witnesses." She looked up at them finally, her violet eyes serious beyond her years. "That's us, by the way. We need to get off this level," Elias said grimly. "My private shuttle is docked on the roof." "That won't work," Lyra said. "They've disabled all transportation systems. But ... double quotes. She tapped one of her screens with a small smile. "I've been busy. Look at this." The screen showed security footage of Vex himself speaking candidly with his security chief. The audio was crystal clear. ... Need to eliminate all evidence. Carter and the alien investigator know too much. Make it look like an accident, resort system malfunction, tragic loss of life. ... "You recorded this?" Naira asked, placing a proud hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Better," Lyra said with a mischievous grin. "I broadcast it. To every communications device in the colony, including Earth Embassy channels." Elias stared at her in amazement. "You what?" It seemed efficient. She shrugged. "Everyone knows what Vex is doing now." A new alarm suddenly blared throughout the resort, different from the previous warnings. "That's the colony-wide alert," Elias said. "Earth security must be responding." The door to the server room slid open, revealing Administrator Vex himself, flanked by 2 armed guards. His gray face was contorted with rage. "You've ruined everything," he snarled, raising his weapon. Before he could fire, Elias moved with surprising speed, tackling Vex to the ground. The guards raised their weapons, but Naira was faster, her energy blade slicing through their guns with precision. "I wouldn't," she warned, the tip of her blade now at one guard's throat. Both guards slowly raised their hands in surrender. Elias pinned Vex to the floor, the administrator's weapon now in Elias's hand. "It's over, Vex. The entire colony knows what you've been doing." "You don't understand," Vex hissed. This was bigger than just stealing from your pathetic resort. We were building something in network that would have controlled commerce throughout the entire system. And that justifies theft and attempted murder? Elias asked incredulously. The sound of boots in the corridor signaled the arrival of Earth's embassy's security forces. Their blue uniforms a welcome sight as they secured the room and took Vex and his guards into custody. The charges? Elias asked urgently. Already being disarmed, the security captain assured him. Your young friend here provided us with their exact locations when she sent her broadcast. Lyra beamed with pride. Later, as the crisis subsided and the resort slowly returned to normal operations, Elias found himself on the observation deck with Naira and Lyra, watching Earth rise over the lunar landscape. What will you do now? He asked Naira as Lyra explored the telescope nearby. Return to headquarters, file my report, she replied. This case led to a much bigger conspiracy than I'd anticipated. There will be investigations throughout the system. And after that? Elias asked, his hand finding hers. Naira smiled, her violet eyes reflecting the blue light of Earth. My assignment here doesn't have a fixed end date, especially since I seem to have found something worth investigating more thoroughly. The criminal network? Elias asked innocently. That too, she laughed softly. But I was thinking of a certain contradiction of a human who fires his entire staff on a child's word, yet turns out to have been right all along. I trust my instincts, Elias said, drawing her closer. And right now they're telling me there's much more to discover about you. A long-term investigation, then? Naira suggested, her arms sliding around his neck. The most thorough kind, he agreed, as their lips met again. Nearby, Lyra rolled her eyes dramatically at the adult's display. But a small smile played on her lips as she turned back to the telescope and the stars. Beyond new horizons waiting to be explored, as Elias held Naira in his arms, with Lyra safe nearby and his resort secure once more, he realized that sometimes the greatest discoveries came not from reaching for the stars, but from the unexpected connections formed along the way. In the vastness of space, they had found each other different worlds converging into something new and hopeful. Like the first light of Earth rising over the lunar horizon,